What he said, you can't believe it's the same woman, Eddie. He was in love with the memory that he had of her, but he also was aware enough that it was just a memory, that he couldn't get that back.
Rodney also remembered his neglected childhood and made the tough decision to forego the paydays and the chance to become an even bigger star to stay close to home and be a father to his children.
And here he was famous. He was Rodney Dangerfield, and there was a big demand for him to go on the road.
The job of a stand-up comic is crowded, so crowded. And just to get a little bit of attention is so difficult. And when you have a little bit of attention, you want more. You don't just walk away because you got to raise some kids. Who does that? Rodney did.
But he decided to open up his own club and put his name on it. Kind of like Ricky Ricardo with the Club Babalu, you know, just going to work every day and being there for the kids and just going and working at nighttime.
At this time, say hello to my partner, Anthony Bavacqua here. Tony, take a bow here.
Rodney hooked up with friend Anthony Bavacqua to open Dangerfields on New York's East Side. Everyone thought he was crazy.
Well, he's a great guy. He's a real workaholic, you know. Hey, you mention work, he gets drunk.
When Rodney talked to his friends about opening the club and trying to borrow a few bucks, his friend says, "You're going to open a club with a bass player?" All clubs were closing. Copacabana closed, the Persian Room closed, and we're opening a club, so they all thought we were nuts.
And I know he borrowed some money, and that was a big deal for Rodney. He didn't like being in debt.
It was difficult, but we did it because Rodney had credibility. He was on shows already. He was doing TV.
Ladies and gentlemen, Rodney Dangerfield!
So we gathered up enough money to get the place open.
Rodney's name recognition
And Dangerfield's okay, David Fry.
and his ability to plug the club anytime he did a television appearance made Dangerfields an instant success.
The first year the club was really successful, and he paid off everybody that he borrowed the money from, and it was a big hit right away.
But true to form, Rodney's continued success still didn't get him any respect.
He said to me, he says, you know, here I am, I got my own club, I'm trying to do well, and this woman came up for me, Eddie, and she said, Rodney, could I have your autograph and some more butter?
By 1970, Dangerfields was thriving. Sadly, though, Joyce's condition continued to deteriorate, and after years of suffering, she passed away, leaving Rodney alone to raise Melanie, age 7, and Brian, age 11.
It was sort of a fatalistic thing that it was coming. I don't know if relief is the word, but it was an acceptance of the reality of that he was prepared for it.
Rodney Dangerfield was now a single father of 2 small children and approaching the age of 50. He knew time wasn't on his side, but he continued running Dangerfields while Melanie and Brian grew up.
He had his priorities right. Raised his children once they were adults, once they had their own lives. Once his responsibility was over, he went back and became even bigger than he was.
The first step in the explosion of Rodney's career was a meeting with some alums from National Lampoon and Second City. They were about to shoot a low-budget movie called Caddyshack.
He was approached by the 3 writers, Brian Doyle Murray and Doug Kinney and Harold Ramis.
Our first thought was that maybe Don Rickles should play the part. But at the time, Rodney had an amazing run on The Tonight Show. He was killing every time, just hysterically funny. And I forgot who first said it, but we said, you know, maybe Rodney's the guy. We didn't know that if he could act, but we thought even if he couldn't act, just being himself would work for us.
And he said, I have reservations about this. I said, why? He said, I'm not doing it, he said, unless I can add lines. I said, Rodney, they're going to be more than happy for you to do lines in the movie.
He liked the part, and he took a $35,000 flat fee to make the movie. Not only did he work for $35,000, he passed up a couple of very lucrative $50,000 gigs in Vegas to make Caddyshack. So he actually lost money making the movie.
Rodney, to me, stole the movie. He had the most quotable lines.
Hey, kid, I'm Al Chervik. I'm playing with Drew Scott today. This is my guest, Mr. Wang. No offense.
I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, hey, they just let him go.
I'm not even sure if he knew that he was stealing that movie when he did it.
Oh, I can give me have a half of those Vulcan D10s and set my friend up here with the whole schmear. You know, clubs, bags, shoes, gloves, shirt, pants. Hey, orange balls. I'll have a box of those. Give me a box of those naked lady tees and give me 2 of those. Give me 6 of those.
There aren't that many comedians today that could take jokes from their act and stick them into a movie. You know, Groucho Marx could do it. W.C. Fields could do it.
Oh, this is the worst looking hat I ever saw. Well, you buy a hat like this, I'll bet you get a free bowl of soup, huh?
And Rodney can do it too.
Oh, it looks good on you, though.
So we worked on his first day's shooting, and I said, all right, action. Rodney, action? He says, you want me to do the bit? I said, yeah, do the bit. Okay, so he was so raw, he didn't even understand that action was the signal to start. But the punchline to that is, by the end of the shoot, he finished the scene and he came over to me and he said, I guess I'm an actor.
The first scene he ever shot, he starts to sweat. I said, oh my God, this guy's gonna have a heart attack. I go, you know, so in between takes, I go, Rodney, are you okay? No, no. I said, what's the matter? He said, I suck, I'm dying out there. I said, what do you mean? Nobody's laughing, nobody's laughing. I said, Rodney, they can't laugh. Right, because I suck. I said, Rodney, they can't laugh because they won't be able to use the soundtrack. And I said, look around, Rodney. He says, not only did every actor, were they down there working or not, to watch him, there were comics that were working, you know, like a couple 100 miles away. They just wanted to see Dangerfield doing his first thing on film like that. And it was, you know, and from that moment on, it was very special.
Caddyshack went on to gross nearly $40 million in the U.S. alone and landed at number 17 for the year 1980, higher than such critically acclaimed films as Raging Bull and The Elephant Man. But its real effect can be seen in the avid cult following it's developed over the years.
Caddyshack may be the most perfect comedy. It has a wonderful flow. It has some archetypical characters that are just perfect. And Rodney, one of the funniest guys ever, at his absolute peak.
Most comedians, that's probably one of their top 10 movies of all time. And it's what we call a road movie. It's something when we get on the bus or get on a plane, we take literally with us and we watch. And it stands up still today, 20-some years later.
I tell you, with girls, I never had any luck, you know.
Rodney, never one to rest on his laurels, kept coming as fast and frantic as his stand-up act, starring in a series of commercials for light beer from Miller.
I tell you, I don't get no respect. Hey, I'll keep the change. Here's Rodney! Ah!
The focus was to appeal to the average Joe six-pack, and Rodney's image fit to a T.
All we need is one pin, Rodney.
When you're on television and you do a show, it's maybe one night a week. And if people don't watch that particular show that night, they missed you. But if you're doing a beer commercial,
a little respect.
that's invaluable. You can't even define how important that is to a performer to be seen like that all day long, all night long.
In 1983, at the age of 61, Rodney took a page from his own life to make the movie Easy Money, starring as hard-living slob Monty Capuletti.
This was like the height of his popularity, and he goes, so they want to do a movie starring me. So if you come up with an idea, let me know. So by the next night, I had this idea of just, a guy has to stop drinking, smoking, and gambling for a year to get $10 million. He thought, that's a good idea.
Rodney said of all of his movies, that particular character was most like the real him.
I'm very familiar with him, and there's a part of me that's part of him too, you know? The idea that a good time is going to the Trek and having a few drinks and gambling. That's part of me too, my personal life. It's hard to contain myself, and that's where we got the idea for the movie.
The party didn't end on stage. It continued. He liked to have fun. I mean, when I met him, I think he was in his 60s. And I just, and I'm in my 20s, I said, this guy's still doing stuff I gave up a few years ago.
I tried marijuana just once, just once. I didn't know what I was doing. I was on cocaine.
He smoked, he drank, he'd blow.
He liked to stay up late, and I think he self-medicated. I think he liked to smoke pot to alleviate his pain and his depression.
He liked that reckless place that most of us step into once in a while. We go there for a while, but it's not that comfortable. He was comfortable there.
He was out of his mind. This was a partier. I mean, I don't think Keith Richards would have gone, hey man, I'm not partying with Rodney Dangerfield, you know. I mean, Rodney, whoa.
He was a man of enormous appetite, so he would stuff himself with anything all day long. With sex, if he would have had it 5 times a day, I'm sure he would have. He was that kind of character. He was like a moving junk heap.
Classic Rodney story. Rodney had a lot to drink. I think he literally had a dozen straight shots and a few beers. And my wife said, you cannot let him drive home. So I pull out, and Rodney's like slumped in the front seat next to me, and he's just moaning. And he says, oh, I'm so low. I'm the lowest thing there is. There's nothing lower than me. I'm lower than. Whatever is lower than, that's what I am. Then he looks at me and says, feel free to disagree with me at any time.
Well, Rodney taught me something very early on, and that was how to be rich, famous, and miserable. I remember one time he went on vacation, he went to Hawaii, and then he came back and I said, hey Rodney, how was Hawaii? And he says, how could it be? I was with me.
Comedy comes from tragedy, and that could not be more true about anyone more than Rodney Dangerfield. He really was a tortured soul who turned it into a lot of jokes and making everyone else laugh, but he didn't laugh a lot himself.
Rodney continued to mine his troubled past to fuel his comedy, and he would soon become a comic legend to a new group of fans with a movie that would become his greatest triumph.
I tell you, showbiz is a tough racket. I mean, I'm doing okay.
By the mid-'80s, Rodney Dangerfield had put his past failures behind him by becoming the biggest thing in stand-up comedy.
Rodney Dangerfield, exposed.
As well as a success in TV and movies. His next project would gain Rodney an entirely new audience, adding a whole new chapter to his legacy. In the process, the film would become one of the top-grossing movies of 1986. But it took an old friend to help him realize the full potential of his concept.
He said, I'm doing this movie where I go back to school with my son. And I said, yeah, that's interesting. He said, yeah, I'm going to play this guy. He said he's a tough putz. He's a total loser, you know, and he has nowhere to go, and his wife leaves him, and his business fails, and he's forced to go back to college. And I said, well, you know, my fantasy about going back to college is that I go back with all the money I've got now and knowing what I know now as a grown-up. College would be great.
Could have changed here.
I don't change in front of guys. I mean, the next thing you know, you're showering with the fellas. And the next thing you know, you're pinned to a sophomore named Chip.
He was working on the script constantly, always in his robe. I remember going by one night to wherever he was staying, and there he was in his robe, but working away, you know. I mean, so much of the funny things that happened in that movie were inspired by him.
How about tomorrow night?
I have class then, too.
I'll tell you what then. Why don't you call me sometime when you have no class?
One of my favorite films of the early 80s, he plays a father who goes back to school. He's so irreverent. He's the soul of comedy. The man of that age who's a money-greedy materialist wants to go back to college so he can pick up girls, and he embarrasses his son is a great idea.
It's a jungle out there. You got to look out for number one, but don't step at number two.
It was a classic comedy, I thought, Back to School.
Back to School grossed more than $100 million at the box office and became a cult hit with the college audience. An audience that became one of Rodney's most rabid groups of fans. Rodney was now 65 years old, and after nearly 50 years of disappointments and failures,
I mean, that's the story of my life. No respect. I don't got no respect at all.
he had finally climbed to the top of the comedy world. Mindful of his struggles, Rodney embraced a group of young comedians and used his stature to help jumpstart their careers.
I know how tough it is for a comedian when he starts. If I see a guy who I think is funny, it's my pleasure to try to move him along. Here, let the people see him.
He appreciated talent.
In this thing called showbiz, he's one of the guys who's coming up real fast.
And I like that about Rodney Dangerfield. He admired other comics because he loved the art of comedy.
Robert Townsend is really dynamite. Okay.
Rodney had a lot of empathy for comedians, so he knew how difficult it was.
Give it up for Robert Schimmel, okay?
He genuinely had a daddy motivation where he kind of felt the need to nurture.
I'm going to hire both of you.
Rodney was offered by HBO a series of stand-up comedy specials where he would bring in stand-up comics and feature them on his HBO specials.
He was the doorkeeper. He was able to open doors for guys that he really liked.
All right, give it up now for Tim Allen, okay? Here we go. All right, Tim, here we go, baby. All right.
Most of the people that were on those shows became superstars.
All right.
It was a big break for them in show business to be on a show with Rodney Dangerfield.
Men are pigs, right, ladies? Yeah. Yeah, just too bad we own everything.
He really loved comedy. He appreciated a good joke, as well as he appreciated a new character.
I don't even know what it takes to get a cab driver's license. I think all you need is a face. This seems to be their big qualification. And a name with like 8 consonants in a row.
Rodney was responsible for a whole bunch of superstars. Seinfeld, Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey was his opening act, which he was very proud of. Andrew Dice Clay, Roseanne Barr. Just all of these people became superstars.
Since God, Roseanne, I cannot even remember the last time we had sex. Well, I can, and that's why we ain't doing it.
People were always talking about it, and you know, it was like there were so many people that shot out. And he had such a good eye for talent. Mr. Macho, he says, "Excuse me, fellas, I have to go home to pork my wife." What kind of talk is this to pork a person? A human being you are talking about, not a farm animal. To booger my babe, to hump my honey, to lace some pipe, to hide the salami, to bury the bone, to stop. You know, it really, really helped me. Nothing ever helped me like that.
I mean, Sam Kinison, nobody would ever give Sam Kinison or Andrew Dice Clay, you know, primetime TV. It was unheard of back then, those kinds of comedians.
Little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet, eating her curds and whey. Long came a Spidey, sat down beside her, he said, "Hey, what's in the bowl?"
Dice was on for 7 minutes, and he became an arena act, which meant he was selling out 15,000 seaters based on 7 minutes on Rodney's HBO special, which was a phenomena.
You're going to get a kick out of Bad Sam, okay? Sammy West.
Sam Kinison was rebellious. Sam was having a tough time in the business because he was different. People were afraid of him because his comedy was extreme.
I'm not like the others. No, this is new love. Come on, trust me, trust me. I wouldn't lie to you 10 times in a row. Come on! Come on, open the door. Let's see what she's like. I thought it was the door to love. It was the door to hell!
I think he enjoyed people that were really unique and had their own voice. And he always championed people that were, you know, offbeat.
He would find a place for you if he really enjoyed what you did and believed in you. And that was so rare. It just shows how generous he was. Most comics are very threatened by other funny people.
He would help us out. Sometimes we would sell him jokes that he'd never use because he knew we needed the money, and he allowed us to keep our dignity, you know. Some really bad material I sold him over the years.
Just having Rodney know you and think you're funny was like you know, you carry it with you like a badge of honor. As a young guy back then, I was like, that was huge for me and for my confidence.
Rodney was really, really very strong on being true to yourself. He said, don't ever change for anyone else. When you walk out on stage and if you go, God, these guys look a little conservative, they came to see you. Don't change for them. You do your thing.
How do blind people know when they're done wiping their Honey, could you come here for a minute? I need you to proofread something for me.
To wind up having a guy that you idolized introducing me as one of his favorite comics, it can't get much better than that. It really can't. I mean, I got to live a dream.
Besides helping these young comedians to live their dreams, Rodney's specials generated huge television ratings for HBO.
Let's keep the applause going for the other guys. They're really great.
With his career humming along, Rodney should have been enjoying his success. But away from the stage, he was still haunted by the old demons.
You know, the roar of the crowd is over. You're alone then after the show. You look for someone to hang out with, you know what I mean? I'm still alone. I can't find no one to hang out with.
But things were about to change for the better, thanks to a chance meeting with a young woman more than 30 years his junior. In 1986, Rodney was fresh off the $100 million box office of Back to School, as well as a series of HBO specials that helped launch the careers of some of the most important rising stars in comedy. But in spite of all this success, Rodney still struggled when he wasn't on stage. All that would change, though, thanks to a kindred spirit, 30-year-old Joan Child.
I met Rodney at a flower shop that I owned in Santa Monica. He was staying at Pritikin Longevity Center at the time, trying to kick a few bad habits like smoking and drinking. And he happened to walk right past my flower shop, and we struck up a conversation, and our romance just sort of blossomed.
I looked at the flowers too much, I guess, and I started looking at Joan, and whatever happened after that.
We basically just hung out together all the time and went to comedy clubs, which was fun. And occasionally, Rodney treated me to an all-night deli. We had a really, really great time.
Rodney finally found the love he'd been looking for his entire life.
Rodney Dangerfield.
Back on stage, he continued to live the rock and roll lifestyle, playing to sellout crowds all over the country.
What the is going on here, huh?
He sold tickets like a rock and roll comic. And his audience, which was also a lot of beer drinking, it was, you know, people came for the party. It wasn't a Neil Sedaka concert. You know, it was, let's go party. We're here to rock.
What do you say we bust up this joint? Bust it wide open, are you kidding?
My wife and I are at one of Rodney's shows, and Jim Carrey opened for him, and you know, it's like a comic opening for a rock star. Get the off the stage, bring out Rodney, we don't you, get out. And poor Jim Carrey left the stage in tears. I thought he was going to leave the business.
I'm not going to lie to you. I got to act smart here and say my favorite place to work is Las Vegas. And the audience here at Bally's is the best audience in the whole world. Man, bullshit. I can't wait to get the out of here, okay?
In 1991, Rodney Dangerfield turned 70 years old.
That's all right, that's all right.
And his hard lifestyle began to take a toll.
I'll see you around, huh? Take it easy.
Pushing him into the worst depression of his life.
Rodney was doing a New Year's Eve performance, and one of his carotid arteries closed off, and he suffered a stroke. And he had to have surgery. It was a very difficult surgery for him to recover from.
The deeper you get into pulling that curtain back, I think it can make you sad. Rodney, as he got older, was very, very sad about that his body wasn't keeping up with him.
He had just kind of shut down and was, you know, wondering what life was all about. It was just this horrible period in his life.
I was sitting on a balcony way high up, and you get thoughts for the moment. It's what the heck? This is, you can't win. What's the point? This and that. And I had all horrible thoughts of ending it.
What stopped him was the fear that he wouldn't die. And thank goodness that stopped him. But the depression was something that just hung over him, that he had to battle every day.
And today I'm still depressed. I found a good psychiatrist, a great guy, and he put me on antidepressant pills. He had the right ones for me, and I'm okay now.
After a 10-year courtship, Rodney and Joan were married on December 26, 1993.
You never know when a love bug will bite you, huh? I was sure I'd never get married again, and Joan felt she'd never get married. So we solved two problems at once then. We got married.
Joan made a miraculous change in his life. She had actually addressed his issues in a way. He just got more organized and actually had a life instead of being that, kind of bachelor, living alone in the hotels. Suddenly he had someone to come home to.
Another major change came when Oliver Stone called Rodney to cast him in his new movie, Natural Born Killers, the shocking, violent story of two psychopathic serial killers who go on a nationwide murdering spree.
He was my first choice for Dad because I just pictured the father as somebody who was partially insane and also at the same time could operate within the confines of a sitcom.
From his usual lovable loser persona.
I brought him this script. He thought I was crazy to want to cast him. He says, "What's so funny about this? He playing a role of a father who abuses his daughter and his wife and his son, who's a monster." He honestly, and I would say, "But it's funny, Ronnie, don't you understand?" And I still have a vivid memory of sitting in this trailer in Arizona, arguing with Rodney Dangerfield.
I was a terrible person, and I was the worst.
So what's it like making the movie, Rodney? He'd go, "You know when you want to punish a kid, you make him write something 100 times? That's what making a movie is like." That's the way he felt. Just like tedium, and he liked the idea of doing it. Hey, look at me, I'm in the movies, But the actual process, not for him.
He played emotions like just the broadest, rawest kind of, depiction of a feeling. But, that outlandishness really worked when he was cast right.
By the age of 73, Rodney Dangerfield had become a living legend in the world of entertainment. But as he approached his 80s, his health continued to fail, forcing Rodney to come face to face with his own mortality. As the 1990s came to a close, Rodney Dangerfield was approaching his 80s, and his years of heavy smoking, drinking, and drug use were beginning to catch up with him.
When you get old, you get certain signs. I walked past a cemetery, two guys ran after me with shovels.
His health was deteriorating, and in the year 2000, he underwent double bypass surgery. It was the first of several difficult surgeries he would undergo over the next few years. But though Rodney wasn't feeling his best, he never stopped working. He continued to do stand-up and appeared in several movies, including a cameo role as Lucifer in Adam Sandler's Little Nicky.
He was so thrilled that, a fellow comic would offer him a part in a movie. It had never happened before, and Rodney was just honored to do that. And it gave him a chance to get to know Adam a little bit.
He seemed like a guy to me that never wanted the laughter to stop. That if he could keep bringing it for centuries and centuries to people, he would.
He never gave up. I saw him close to the end, and he was still fighting to make movies.
He didn't have to work as hard as he did. Not only was he doing his act, but he was also still trying to do movies. And it got tougher and tougher, but, he just wanted to make people laugh.
On November 22, 2001, Rodney turned 80 years old and had a special appearance on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, where a comedian he helped on his way up paid him a special tribute.
It was his birthday, and he went and he started doing his material and sat down. And Jay Leno said, "We have a surprise for you, surprise guest." Jim Carrey walks in.
When Jim walked out, it was a big emotional moment for Rodney. He was just thrilled. And they were saying happy birthday, and all of the festivities took place, and hugging and happiness.
The happiness would be short-lived, however. As that same night, after the show, Rodney Dangerfield suffered a minor heart attack.
You were 17 yesterday, you'll be 50 tomorrow. Get older, doctors tell you don't smoke, don't drink, eat certain foods at my age. What can I look forward to? Now, from this point on, if I take excellent care of myself, I'll get very sick and die.
Not only did his medical problems not stop Rodney from working, they also didn't curb his love for marijuana.
At my age, I should be reading the papers. I'm looking to roll them.
Under the compassionate use law, the state of California granted him medical marijuana approval. He could smoke whenever he wanted, legally.
I was in the ICU with him at one of his surgeries, and I walk in there and there's these oxygen tanks that say no smoking, and Rodney's lighting up a joint, right? And he's smoking, and Harry, man, how are you, okay? You know, and I'm in there, Rodney, you're supposed to be, man, it's okay, I draw, you know, you could do anything when you draw.
Rodney continued to draw praise for his comedic career, and in 2002, he was honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He was also recognized by the Smithsonian Institute, who put his trademark black suit, white shirt, and red tie on display. But among the accolades, Rodney was continuing to deteriorate.
You know when you're really old? When your family talks about you in front of you.
At that point, he was starting not only to have the fatigue and shortness of breath from his cardiac problem, but he was also beginning to have episodes where he almost fainted.
There's a funny memo where his doctor called the front desk at the building that he lived in and left a message. The doctor said, you have to have brain surgery before you have your heart surgery. That's it. And he goes, these are the messages I get, you know? Rodney wanted to live. He wanted to keep working.
Once he recovered from the surgery, his symptoms started falling away. He was sharper, he had less fatigue, and he was already starting to talk about planning his next performance.
Less than a month after undergoing brain surgery, Rodney made a surprise appearance at the Laugh Factory.
Rodney a little bit looked fragile, and I walked him to the stage. And I remember after first and second joke he said, he got this rolling laughter. That audience gave him life. That audience, that laughter, that applause gave him energy. It was amazing. I never seen anything like that. I thought it was the most amazing thing I ever seen any human being doing on the stage.
Despite his failing health, Rodney continued to work, and in 2004, he published his autobiography, It's Not Easy Being Me, A Lifetime of No Respect, but Plenty of Sex and Drugs. It went on to be a New York Times and national bestseller. But success couldn't forestall the inevitable.
I remember him saying to me, he goes, hey, you know, Harland, I'm in my 80s now. Only 10% of people make it out of their 80s. It's strange to see people kind of looking at the clock, and especially when you have a person that offers so much and brings joy to people in their life while they're alive. It's kind of hard to see that in a person.
On August 24, 2004, Dangerfield went back to UCLA for heart valve replacement surgery. Never one to miss a punchline. When asked how long he'd be hospitalized, he said if all goes well, about a week. If not, about an hour and a half. On August 24, 2004, at the age of 82, Rodney Dangerfield was admitted to UCLA Medical Center for heart valve replacement surgery.
After Rodney's final heart surgery, he slipped into a coma and was in the coma for 40 days. They pretty much let me try everything to try to bring him out. And part of that included they gave me permission to bring in beyond family, other people that had strong emotional connections to him. And I got on the phone and called a few comics. And they all knew the mission. Try to say something that maybe Rodney would react to. I heard some of the best material in the world from Jay Leno, Jim Carrey, Adam Sandler. Louis Anderson came almost every day. Bob Saget, Andrew Dice Clay, Roseanne, and we just thought there was hope. There was a chance.
Is he in there? Is he hearing me? You know, I held his hand, I talked to him, I did all those things that you would do with any person you loved. I just thought, man, this guy should be alive.
On October 5, 2004, at 1:20 p.m., Rodney Dangerfield passed away from complications of heart surgery. He was 82. A memorial was held for him a few days later at Westwood Memorial Park in Los Angeles.
His funeral literally was a command performance. It was the who's who of comedy anywhere.
We all had one thing in common. Rodney at one time had said, hey, you know, you're funny. You're original. Hang in there, baby, or whatever it was. And it lifted us up.
It was amazing. A tribute to a life well lived.
That room was tragic and sad and happy and laugh. It was so much emotion.
We were all sad about why we were there, but everybody was starstruck. You know, everywhere you looked, you know, there was just these huge comedy stars, and that just is a testament to what a great man he was and what a comedy legend he was.
What a crowd, what a crowd. The other day I told my kid, I said, someday you'll have children of your own. He said, so will you.
Last week I noticed my gums were shrinking. I was brushing my teeth with preparation H.
Well, last week my house was on fire. My wife told the kids, be quiet, you'll wake up Daddy.
Rodney is the only comic I can think of where guys get together and they'd all start quoting jokes of his.
She can't cook at all. How can toast have bones, you know? The garbage disposal threw up. She made my kid alphabet soup. He spelled out help.
I'll tell you, my wife is loose. You know, she's a tramp. She's like FedEx. She absolutely has to be there overnight.
It's all about not getting respect. You know, my wife likes to talk during sex. Last week, she called me from a motel.
He says, I went to my first orgy last week, you know. It was the first time I had to apologize to a group of people.
I saw a guy running naked down the street. I said, what are you doing? He said, you're home early.
I'll tell my wife she can't drive. The other day she hit a tree. She said it wasn't her fault, she blew the horn. I took my wife to the zoo. They thanked me for bringing her back.
You know, my family, during the Civil War, they fought for the West.
My wife, she's a lousy cook. At my house, we pray after we eat.
He had extremely clever material. You have to look at his stuff is really, I was so ugly when I was born, they slapped my mother.
And I liked hanging out with him.
I want to improve my personality.
Good luck. It was funny. He was so unusual. Every moment you spent with him, you knew was kind of there was going to be an anecdote later about it.
He was special. There's not many Rodney Dangerfields that come along. He's a unique individual.
You know, Rodney, I think, as funny as he was, I think he deserves a special place in our hearts because he helped lift up so many funny people.
He gave me the greatest gift you could ever give from one comic to another. I got to have an idol introduce me to the world on television. What more could you ask for that? I mean, if he was alive, I couldn't repay him.
Rodney was like a father to me. He did a lot to help launch a lot of people's careers, mine included. Unbelievable amount of respect. There's not a day that goes by where I'm not telling somebody a story about Rodney or thinking about him. You know, he touched my life so much.
Rodney Dangerfield is one of the great, unique stand-up comics to have ever graced the stage, and
Last week I was a rough shape, you know?
he was a legend.
Really one of my heroes, you know. I think for a lot of comics coming up. He was just brilliant.
Rodney Dangerfield is the best comedian I ever met. God, I'm sappy. But he is. He's the best comedian. I mean, I'd have to say, all in all, the character, the jokes, the whole thing, The whole package, he's the best.
Hey, I'm very blessed to have spent so many years with one of the most brilliant comics ever. It's just an amazing, amazing experience.
Rodney's one of these guys you think of and you smile a lot. They should have made more of him.
I mean, but God, he was so hip. And a great comic artist. I miss Rodney. God, it's tough not to.
I don't think he really believed he was that good. But the audience said, yes, you're wonderful. And he was. And that's it.
And you know, he always say, hey, you got no respect, you know, no respect. In reality, all he did was get respect.
I mean, that's the story of my life. No respect. I got no respect.
Rodney Dangerfield was bigger than life. He was worth every nickel you ever paid to see him. He gave everybody full value. He gave you laughter for your time, for your money, and your effort to come out and see him. He loved you.
Rodney is a series of memories and jokes and great performances, and he will be remembered. And can't wait for the next generation of kids to ask me about Rodney Dangerfield, because some great stories to tell and some fantastic jokes. And that would be something he'd be very proud of.
I just wish that everyone had the chance that I had to spend so much time with him and to see his humanity and his generous spirit. I was the luckiest girl in the world.
Like everyone else in this thing called showbiz, I like applause, but I'll tell you, there's something to me that's more important than applause. May mean nothing to you, but a lot to me. It's just when I walk off, if you'd all just give me one of these.